I watched more films in 1 year in 2021 than I had done in any particular 1 year in the 5 preceding years. I actually set out with an aim to watch more films than I had done in those years. So now that that year is over, I thought, hey, let's make a video about it. Let's talk about all those films I watched. So I'm going to go through each of those films in this video, what I wrote about them at the time and what score I gave them, and just generally, if my opinions have changed about them since, we'll just chat about them, yeah? How do you remember every film you watched? Now, some people have letterboxes, is that what they're called, I think? There's these websites that specialise in that. I've gone old school. I have a Facebook photo album where I put the poster of every film I watch in a year, create an album for that year, put the poster in, put a little mini like literally 1 paragraph review and give it a mark out of 10, and then I post that up on my Facebook. I've been doing that since I think 2016 was the first time I've done it. And this year, as I said, I've watched the most films I have done in any of those years that I've been doing it. Now, to the cinephiles amongst you, it won't sound like a lot. It was 47 or 48 films. Now, I say that because I'm sure I hit 48, but just looking back at the album, there were only 47 pictures in the album. So I think I've missed off one somewhere, which annoys me because 47 would perfectly divide down, 48 even, would perfectly divide down into 4 films a month. So roughly average of about 1 a week, or at least 4 films a month, which seemed like a good aim at the time. And that's what I was aiming for. So if I actually only hit 47, that's really annoying because it's like 3.9 something films a month. That would annoy me. But either way, it's still the most I've managed to watch in any 1 year. And I'm sure there's loads of you that watch like more than 1 film a week and think, what? That's hardly any. Well, look, fine. You've got loads of free time. I don't. I have kids. They take up a lot of my time. I have other hobbies. I have a YouTube channel. I've got work. Yeah, I don't have time to be watching films all the time, okay? So this is an achievement for me. Let's see if I beat it in 2022. I might do, with a couple of plans for other videos I've got up, which involve movie marathons, so that might work. There are no particular rules for this. Any movie I watch will go on this list. It just has to be a movie, not a TV show, not a TV special. A TV movie would probably count, but I don't think there are any of those on there. Netflix movies count. It's basically any movie. It doesn't have to be a new movie. It could be a movie I've watched 100 times before. If I watch it in this year, it goes on the list. Those are the only rules. So what's the first thing I watched this year? It was Wonder Woman 1984. This is what I had to say about it at the time. Now I really like the first Wonder Woman film, but this just didn't quite hit. It's not without some merit. I actually really like how they handled the ending, and I like what they were trying to do with the themes explored, but there were quite a few problems with the earlier stuff in the film. Not as bad as something like Suicide Squad, but a bit of a disappointment. And to clarify, I'm talking about the first Suicide Squad there. 6 out of 10. So, wasn't massively impressed with the Wonder Woman. I think partly that was, I'd really liked the first Wonder Woman, and this just felt like such a step down from it. It was a disappointment, especially coming from the same creative team. Patty Jenkins was back directing, and I think she'd done a fantastic job with that first one. So I was kind of left a bit perplexed about what happened with Wonder Woman 1984. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a bad movie, but it was definitely a step down on the first one. Then, a Netflix film, Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. This was hilarious. I loved it. This is what I wrote about it at the time. It's not showing me what I wrote about it at the time. Why is it not showing me what I wrote about it at the time? I want what I gave it as a score. I think it's because I posted 2 films at the same time, so it's now not showing me in the album what I wrote about them. But I really liked Eurovision, the Story of Fire Saga. It was just such a funny film. Will Ferrell was on top form. The songs themselves were fantastic. I like Eurovision, and I like a lot of the Euro poppy songs that you get on Eurovision. And this it was perfect. I would actually vote for the song that they created for this film if it was ever in Eurovision. So, and it was, as well as being a As well as being a very funny story, it was also a very heartwarming story as well, about this guy and his love life as well, and just it was a great film. If you haven't seen it, especially if you like Eurovision, go check out the story of Fire Saga. Then we've got Disney Pixar's Soul. Again, I can't see the comment on this one, so I don't know what I gave it. I don't know what I said about it at the time, but I did really enjoy this one. I think it was Pixar. Pixar do great stories that usually, for the most part, hit on some kind of emotional level, and this didn't fail in that. It had some engaging characters, it had a nice heartwarming tale to tell, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Can't remember what I gave it out of 10 though. Then we have the animated Addams Family movie. I remember loving the Addams Family films of the 90s, the first two especially. I think the third one was a bit, when they recast everybody, was a bit less interesting, but the first two live action ones really liked. This was very different to that, not just because it was animated, but I think this is very much, it was drawn in the style of the original cartoons, as opposed to being like Gomez is a more of a short, plump, slightly rounded man, whereas he's very tall and suave. He's still quite suave he's got the personality to match, but there's different differences in the personalities portrayed here, and I think they match up more with the original cartoon strips that were made for the Addams Family. It was a good film. What did I write about it at the time? I can see this one. It says, I grew up mostly watching the 90s live action Addams Family movies. This felt very different to those. Basically what I've just said. Not just because of the animation, but also the characterization and tone. But I still really enjoyed it. A fun and entertaining family film, and I gave it 7 out of 10. Then we've got our first dud of the year. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, the sequel live-action Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. Yeah, I was a big Turtles fan in the 90s. I loved the cartoon, the long-running cartoon that was on in the 90s. I had some toys, not a massive amount, but I had some, and other merchandise, and I think I had a VHS. It was, yeah, I was a Turtles fan as a kid. This is what I had to say about it. The only thing this movie really has going for it were the nods to nostalgia. As someone who grew up watching the 90s cartoon, it was nice to see Bebop and Rocksteady and Kang and the Technodrome in live action. But the film as a whole, bad. In true Michael Bay style, with its mostly big action scene to big action scene with no real substance in between. The story's barely there and it doesn't make sense half the time, and the dialogue is comically clunky in the worst way. Every character is like a caricature of one or two personality traits, and I gave it 3 out of 10. I have a feeling this was the worst movie I watched this last year. The one I gave the worst score to, I'm pretty sure. While the first of the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies was also quite bad, this was worse. Definitely worse. There was more I got out of enjoyment-wise of the first one. Then we've got Teen Titans Go to the Movies. So what I wrote about this one was that my daughter wanted to watch it, and it was actually a lot of fun. I was a fan of the old Teen Titans cartoon circa 2005 and previously hadn't been keen on this more comedic take on the franchise and the characters, but this was clever and very meta with lots of jokes for the adults and comic book fans too, and I gave it 8 out of 10, so it really surprised me. Because like I said, I had really liked the 2005 era cartoon, so when they brought this version of Teen Titans, voiced by the same people, based on those character designs, but very much cutified up and played up the humour. When I saw the trailers and the adverts for it, I was like, that's not for me. And that's fine. Not everything has to be for me. But I did really enjoy watching this, and I've since found out I'm not sure if it's another movie or if it's just an episode of the TV show, but there's an episode where they cross over with the versions of the characters that I watched. In a kind of multiversal thing. So I'm going to have to watch that at some point too. 8 out of 10. This is a strong film. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I watched it. And any excuse to get my daughter watching, if she comes to me and says she wants to watch a superhero thing, I'm definitely not saying no, because any chance to get her into more superhero stuff is a good thing. Next is The Dig. Me and my wife have a deal where basically if we're watching a film without kids, then we alternate in picking the film. This is one of her picks. It might not have been something I picked myself, but I did quite enjoy it. It's a very sedate, as I said in the thing, it's a very sedate film, but enjoyable. Good performances all round. It had Carey Mulligan in it and Ralph Fiennes. And as ever with films based on real events, the historical accuracy, a little iffy. But still an enjoyable watch. I gave it 6 out of 10. If you don't know what The Dig is, it's about the discovery, I think, of the Sutton Hoo find, the various Anglo-Saxon stuff that was found in the 20s and has been preserved, I think. My wife works in the museum sector, so it's very much down her street. I think that's probably why she wanted to watch it, but also, you know, it was a good character drama as well, especially Ralph Fiennes' character was very interesting to watch and see sort of his journey throughout the film. So yeah, it was a good film. I watched the live action Mulan, which I said about was that it wasn't terrible. Good start, not being terrible. I did find the first half quite slow and a bit uninteresting though. Picked up in the second half. Lacked talking dragons. Because of course if you've seen the animated Disney thing, there is the famous talking dragon. Voiced I think by Eddie Murphy. Who's quite funny. No talking dragon in this. I gave the film 6 out of 10. It's kind of one of those, it's kind of one of those middling Disney live action ones. There are some really good ones. I really like Cinderella, for instance. That was a really good live action adaptation. There are some middling ones like this, Beauty and the Beast, which is basically doesn't do anything new, and then there's some bad ones as well, but this was kind of middling. Then we've got Baywatch, the Baywatch movie, and I said I had this to say about it. This was fun. Very self-aware film, never takes itself too seriously and isn't afraid to get very meta with its references. Had me laughing out loud throughout. Dwayne Johnson is just so charismatic in everything that he's in, you cannot love his character. And there are some dodgy CGI in the boat fire bit, but other than that, don't really have any complaints. I gave it 9.5 out of 10. Wow. I mean, I don't know if I was just having a really happy day, but obviously I really enjoyed that film. And, you know, I think there's a sequel in the works. I'd be up for a sequel to that. It was fun. I did used to watch Baywatch back in the day as a teenager and younger. So, but it was fun to see the sort of meta references and things like that. The Kingsman, The Golden Circle was next. This is the second film in the Kingsman series. There's a new one out now, isn't there? There's a prequel out. I had this to say about it. Like the first film so much, we rented the sequel the following night, which must mean I watched... Oh yeah, sorry, I've done it in the wrong order. Did watch The Kingsman first. So Kingsman The Secret Service I watched. And I said, I didn't have much to say about this, but it's a glowing review nonetheless. I said, that was a thoroughly fun film. Great story, great action, great characters. Succinct and to the point. I gave it 10 out of 10. That's how much I liked Kingsman The Secret Service. And then as I was just saying, the very next night we rented the sequel because we'd enjoyed the first one so much. It's a good film, not as good as the first. Eggsy's journey was a large part of what made the first one so compelling, and there isn't the same hook here. Also, the action seemed a little more toned down. Was still good though. Elton John had me laughing out loud in one of his scenes. Looking forward to the prequel out later in the year, which is now out. I haven't seen it yet. And hope they do another sequel at some point, which I believe is also in the works. I gave the sequel 8.5 out of 10. Just still a pretty solid score. Not 10 out of 10 solid, but still good. Ooh. Space Jam is next, the original Space Jam. Thought I would watch this as there's a sequel coming later this year. Some of it hasn't aged well. It was mostly still a bit of fun nostalgia though. I did love Space Jam when I was a kid, but it came out when I was a kid, so yeah. I gave it 6 out of 10 here. I still haven't bothered getting around to watching the sequel, so I'm clearly not that fussed. To be honest, I think it was rewatching this that made me think, maybe I won't bother with the sequel. I'll see it eventually when it comes on Netflix or something. Is it on Netflix yet? Can anybody tell me? Can I stream it anywhere for free? Like, if I've already got a subscription to that service yet? Then we have the big controversial one. Just Zack Snyder's Justice League. The Snyder cut of Justice League. Oh boy, look how much I wrote on this one. I wrote quite a lot. Okay, let's delve into what I wrote. Gradually watch this over a week or so. Seriously, this is too friggin' long. But I will say, it is mostly a better version than the 2017 version. Characters like Flash and Cyborg get actual character development. The tone is consistent throughout and the story is much more engaging. There is humour, but it feels natural with characters it belongs with, like the Flash. Unlike 2017's humour, which felt forced. But it's not without its flaws. It takes way too long lingering on excruciating scenes in slow motion of characters just walking dramatically to a slowly sung soundtrack. Aquaman. In fact, just generally, scenes go on way too long. Sure, some of the shots look beautiful, but it's completely style over substance in those moments. And the movie suffers from multiple ending syndrome. It feels like it should end, and then, no, it hasn't ended. There's a really good film in here, it just needs some brutal cutting. Do a 3-hour cut of this version and you'd probably hit the sweet spot. I'd be interested in seeing the follow-up though, even though they say they never plan to make it, which is more enthusiasm than I had for this franchise before watching this. So I gave it a 7 out of 10, and I put in brackets that I think I gave the 2019 version a 5 out of 10. Yeah, this film was, like I say, better than the original version, the 2017, 29, whatever version it was. That version. Better than that, but still had deep flaws and needed some brutal cutting. Basically, it just shouldn't have been 4 hours long. 3 hours, you probably could have got a good movie out of it. Next was 6 Minutes to Midnight. This has Eddie Izzard, Judi Dench, James Darcy, David Scofield, Jim Broadbent. It has a lot of great people in this film. What I wrote about it was that it's an interesting film about an Anglo-German school, a girls' school in England with German students just before World War II breaks out. Eddie Izzard's pretty good in it, much more grounded than the usual characters I've seen her play, and Judi Dench is always good, of course, although I wouldn't say the script really gives this anything scene-stealing. The plot kept me intrigued from the start, and it never felt like it was going on too long. Nothing grabbed me on an emotional level though, but for a fun little spy thriller, this was entertaining. I gave it 7 out of 10. Then we've got Bumblebee, Every Hero Needs a Beginning. About this film, I wrote, nice to finish a Transformers film without thinking, oh, thank God it's finally over. For once. Yeah, it's because it wasn't directed by Michael Bay. Actually, a decent film with a relatable human lead for a change, and nice to see some more classic designs for Transformers. And I gave this 7 out of 10. Jumanji: The Next Level was next, and I've put these modern Jumanji films, this is the sequel I think, this one. These modern Jumanji films are just great. The leads acting with personalities not usually associated with themselves is just constantly hilarious. So I think, I can't remember which film happened in which, but like the first one I think we maybe had Jack Black being being inhabited by the personality of the sort of popular cheerleader girl and things like that, and Dwayne Johnson being inhabited by the school nerd, that kind of thing. Really funny. I want more of these films. I really do hope they make more, and with this cast ideally. Dwayne Johnson particularly hilarious, but the rest are also just as good. Karen Gillan is of course in this as well. She's great as well. I gave this 10 out of 10. Another 10. Nice. Next was Men in Black International, and I wrote, that was okay. Not as good as the Will Smith ones, but still good. Hemsworth has good comic timing, and the little alien Pawnee was one of the best things in the film. I actually now can't remember what Pawnee is. I watched this film in April, but apparently I liked Pawnee. Clearly this film didn't leave much of an impression on me to remember my favourite character from the film. But I gave it 7 out of 10 anyway. Then we watched the Disney sequel to Maleficent, I can't even say that. Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. I let a very short review on this one I left. I went, yeah, that was alright. And that's all I wrote. I gave it 7 out of 10 though, so it can't have been bad. I was, like I say, yeah, it's alright. I can't remember much about it now, to be honest. I guess it was alright. Another one that's had some controversy, Joker. This is what I wrote about it. A disturbing psychological thriller, and I guess disturbing is what good psychological thrillers should be. It's a fascinating character study of the protagonist and his descent. Not for the faint-hearted though, there is some quite graphic violence. Great cinematography. I give it 8.5 out of 10, so I actually really liked Joker. It was a good film. It felt very much like an independent film, even though it was made by a big studio and is a DC Comics film. So it had that kind of vibe to it. I really liked that. It was good. I don't know if it necessarily needs a sequel. There's always these rumours about sequels to it, but I don't think it really needs one. But we'll see. Disney fare next. Raya the Last Dragon. I put solid Disney film. Great animation, heartwarming story, some good some good martial arts action scenes. No songs, but not sure they would have worked in this one anyway. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, I'm always slightly disappointed when a Disney mainline animation film isn't a musical. What can I say? I like musicals, but it was a good film anyway. Then I watched The New Mutants, the last of Fox released X-Men movies in that universe. This is what I wrote. I wrote, actually a pretty good film, which surprised me. Shame the Essex Corporation references in this and Deadpool 2 will never build into whatever they were planning with it now that Fox has been bought out by Disney, but this works as an interesting psychological thriller by itself. I gave it 7.5 out of 10. It is. If you take all the expectation about what it should be as an X-Men film, this is a really good psychological thriller, and if you haven't seen it and enjoy superhero movies, but also enjoy psychological thrillers, check this out. Now, the next 3 films are definitely rewatches. They're MCU movies that I rewatched for. I was appearing on the Spill Your Beans podcast by George Shard to review the first 3 MCU movies. So for that, I will leave a link in the description below to that podcast. You can find my episode that I was a guest on. And for a more full review, you can go to that. But we watched Iron Man, Iron Man 2, and The Incredible Hulk. And I can't see what I wrote because I posted them all up at the same time. But, you know, MCU movies, my general feeling is that, while Incredible Hulk is one of the not as great ones at the MCU, I don't think the MCU has made a bad movie. And this is still an interesting movie. Much more, actually, it was much more interesting than I remembered it being. So, even though we've moved on from Edward Norton and things, his portrayal was interesting and I did really enjoy it during the film. It was a different take to what we've got now, but I think it worked and it was good. And Iron Man 1 is just brilliant. Iron Man 2 has its flaws, but I still do kind of like it. They went too much with the trying to world build too much at the sacrifice of the story, but other than that, good film. Sticking with MCU, I next watched Black Widow when it came onto Disney Plus Premium. I think I paid extra to see that. Again, I can't get up what I wrote about at the time, but my general feeling of it is that if it was more like it was in the first 2/3 and stuck with that kind of feeling, that kind of gritty spy espionage-y feeling, it would have been better, but it got a bit too superhero-y in the 3rd act. And the whole jumping, like ordinary human being, no superpowers, jumping from falling debris to falling debris while having a fight mid-air, it stretched the credibility a little bit, I think. I think if they'd stuck with that more somber, gritty spy thriller tone from the beginning 2/3, I think it would have been a lot better. But not, again, MCU haven't made a bad film, it's just kind of middling. Another Disney Pixar one, Luca. Loved this. This was a great film. I don't have my mark for it that I gave it here, but I do remember really liking it. A great story, some great allegories in there for maybe I've seen lots of videos talking about how it's a good allegory for coming out and things like that. Even aside from all that, it's a really good story about just these personal connections between these 3 kids, and two of them are sea monsters. It's a really good story, and like any Disney Pixar, like I said earlier, has that heartwarming, touching moments, story elements that I like in Disney Pixar films. Rocket Man is the Elton John biopic. Having seen Elton John earlier in Kingsman: The Golden Circle, to then watch this where he is played by the guy that plays Eggsy in Kingsman, was really slightly surreal, but there we go. This is what I said about it. Solid biopic. I really like the stylized non-realism approach, because they would just kind of come out and you'd kind of go into his head and suddenly sets would disappear from behind him and he'd be in the middle of a dance number. I like that. I kind of like that stylized way it did it. I thought, it's what I said, I thought it gave an insight into what might have been going on in Elton's mind in that moment. Taron Egerton does a fantastic job in this role, including the singing, and I learned a lot about Elton John's life that I didn't know before. So there we go. I gave this 8 out of 10. Now, as I said in my Doctor Who Eve of the Daleks review, I love a time loop story, and this next film is a time loop story, and one of the best ones I've seen. Palm Springs. This is what I said. This was a thoroughly entertaining film, a unique take on the stuck in a time loop story that is funny throughout, but also heartwarming as well. Great casting, great chemistry, and a great story. 10 out of 10. It's another 10 out of 10. If you haven't seen Palm Springs, I think it's Netflix. Go check it out, especially if you love time loop stories. It is fantastic. It is hilarious. Go watch it. Next was the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society. That's a mouthful. This is a film all about Guernsey during the Nazi occupation and just after it. This is what I said. What started as an enjoyable enough, pleasantly calm and meandering film in the style of many British period films really started to engage as the mystery of the Literary Society was revealed through more and more flashbacks to the German occupation of the island. Delving into the personal stories of those under German occupation, the film paces its reveals at just the right moments. Felt a bit sorry for Mark at the end though. Mark is the, I think, fiance of the main character who travels to the island to find out the stories of what happened during the occupation, and I think he gets pushed aside. He seems like a lovely guy, but he gets kind of like ditched for somebody she falls in love with on the island, which is a bit harsh. But I gave that 8 out of 10. It was a good film. Go check it out. Another MCU movie next, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I said first time back in the cinema. Oh yeah, it's the first time I'd gone back to the cinema to watch anything in a year and a half, and it was definitely worth it apparently. Great fight choreography, although I would say the camera. I think I mistyped that. Although I would say the camera was a bit too frantic and a bit hard to follow. And they managed to tell a compelling story between the characters, even with the bad guys, that felt natural. 9 out of 10. That's a pretty solid score for an MCU movie there. 9 out of 10. I did really enjoy Shang-Chi. I think some people have been saying that the ending isn't, let it down a little bit, but I quite like the ending, to be honest. I didn't mind it at all. Next, we got The Girl on the Train. Good thriller. I did have an inclination as to who the guilty party might be pretty early on though, but it didn't completely ruin the film. I've not read the book, so I don't know how it compares. I gave this 6.5 out of 10. It was fine. I didn't regret watching it. I think I wasn't bored. It was just an okay film. What We Do in the Shadows. I've been hearing a lot about this before I watched it, and it's by, I can never quite get his name right first time, Taika Waititi? I think I might have done. Taika Waititi, who directed Thor Ragnarok. And he's in this as well as directing it, and it was freaking hilarious. There is a TV show which I still need to check out, a spin-off, but I haven't seen that yet. I do need to check it out. You can tell me in the comments how much I need to check it out. Been meaning to watch this one for a while. Very amusing style mockumentary following house share vampires in New Zealand. That's what it's about. If you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. Basically 3 vampires of 3 different personalities of vampires as well, all sharing a house share in New Zealand with the comedy stylings of Taika Waititi, if you know his style. It was very well cast, 9 out of 10. Now, before going to see No Time to Die, the latest James Bond movie in the cinema, did a little marathon of the James Bond films. And I think actually this is where my missing film is, because I've only got Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall. I haven't put Spectre on there, but I did see Spectre. So that's my missing film. I do have my 48. Yes. Casino Royale, we watched these over about a 2-week period, all the ones leading up to it. So Casino Royale, I said, started our rewatch of Daniel Craig Bond movies in preparation for the new one at the end of the month. This was a fantastic reboot for the franchise, kicked off this new version off with a punchy revamp to the style that shook off those cheesy, dated feel many Bonds had, and wasn't afraid to shake up the formula either, establishing story arcs which would cross multiple movies. Hell, it even ends with a cliffhanger that leads straight into the next one, and I gave Casino Royale 10 out of 10. Another 10 out of 10 movie. About Quantum of Solace, I said, another one down in my rewatch. This film gets a lot of flack, and yes, it has its flaws, so I'm being called, I've got to go, but I'm going to hurry this up. The editing decisions are bizarre and sometimes make it really difficult, but okay, I'm going to skip all this because I'm in a bit of a rush, but 6.5 out of 10 I gave this one. I did say it does lack the emotional hit of Casino, but charts the further development of Bond's character in his early 007 career. It feels like a natural evolution for the character. Skyfall, I gave 10 out of 10. It's a fantastic Bond movie, isn't it? What brilliant Bond movie. I said things like the cinematography stunning, like the silhouette fighting against the bright Shanghai lights. Personal story for both Bond and M is really engaging and really touching and pulls on the heartstrings, especially when poor M dies. Spoilers. But yeah, great movie. One of my favourite Bond movies, definitely 10 out of 10. I did not have my review for Spectre. It is okay, I guess. It's better than, because I think it's better than Quantum, possibly. Is it? I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe I'll do a ranking of all the Bond movies at some point. But No Time to Die. This is what I read about that. Damn, that was a good film. A very good film. A fitting end to the era. A roller coaster of emotions. I think I was trying to avoid spoilers. Like many of the Dave Craig era... Like many of the Daniel Craig era, it does its own unique thing rather than relying on a template, but roll in a few classic elements and does that somewhat more subtly than Spectre did. It's a contender for my new favourite Bond film for sure. Go see this in cinema if you can, and if you feel safe to do so. 10 out of 10. So 10 out of 10. 3 of the Daniel Craig movies got 10 out of 10. Then I saw Venom. I enjoyed Venom. Hadn't been too fussed about seeing it, but I did quite enjoy it. I gave it 7 out of 10. The Nightmare Before Christmas, which I watched in October the 24th. So as I watched it, it can be watched as a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie. We watched it as a Halloween movie. And yeah, I gave that 9 out of 10. Love this. Great songs, great story, great animation. What's not love to love? Then we've got Hocus Pocus. I don't have what I wrote about it. It's one of those classic Disney ones from the 90s that I'd heard about quite a lot. It was okay, I guess. I wasn't massively impressed with it. There's a sequel coming out soon. Might watch it. But it was alright. Not a particularly one that I would ever watch again. Next was Snowpiercer. It's one that Emily picked and then regretted because it was very violent, and she doesn't massively like really violent films. I thought it was brilliant. I don't have my review for it here, but I think I marked it quite highly. It was engaging, the acting was brilliant. It's got John Hurt in it. He was really good. And it's got one of the Chris's, Chris Evans. It's got Chris Evans in it. He was really good. Great cast, great film, all fun. Gunpowder Milkshake with Karen Gillan. This is a fun film. Funny and fun, and quite violent. I wouldn't say it has any more depth than that, but it's an entertaining and fun watch, and it has a brilliant cast. 8 out of 10. Home Sweet Home Alone, the new sequel / spin-off to the Home Alone franchise, which of course classically had Macaulay Culkin in the first 2 films. Loved the first 2 films as a kid. Really didn't like the third one with a new cast. This one, I think, does a good balance of maintaining some classic elements, but doing something different, especially with the burglar aspect. I won't spoil it, but they do something different with that I appreciate, and I think it added a new dynamic to it, and it was a different kind of movie. It's got the kid from Jojo Rabbit in it, he was hilarious. Definitely a good replacement, and it feels slightly weird to have a British kid there, but still really good. Yeah, I'd recommend it. If you like the first two Home Alone films but have been put off by the silly straight-to-DVD sequels they had that weren't that great, check this one out. Nativity. It kind of felt a bit like a TV sitcom, to be honest. It was very low budget, and it was the way it was filmed was it just felt like a TV sitcom to start with, and I kind of had that feeling until a good 45 minutes into it. Then I started to get more engaged with the characters, and you know, it's a fun, silly Christmas movie. If you want something that's not going to tax your brain too much, it's okay. But maybe I'll watch one of these a year, because there's like 5 sequels with different people in each time. I think David Tennant's in one. I'll definitely have to watch that one. Yeah, it was just okay, I'd say. Horrible Histories, the movie. This is what I wrote about that. Some funny jokes, some very cheesy songs, but a very sanitized version of history. It's a kid's film, I guess. Weirdly apologetic for Roman invasion, though. 6 out of 10. It was okay. It had some funny people in it, some funny scenes in it, but wasn't massively impressed. Murder on the Orient Express. I watched this when it was on telly over Christmas. I said, hadn't seen or read any version of this before, so the ending actually surprised me. A fantastic all-star cast who all had the acting chops to go with their big names, and it's beautifully shot. Engaging throughout, 9 out of 10, and the sequel to that is about to come out, I think, Death on the Nile. Dunkirk is my penultimate film of the year. I said a very harrowing film that expertly builds tension throughout with its visuals and its constant drone-like score. Nolan plays with time like he does in a lot of his films. He's not really a fan of linear storytelling, and at times it can take a bit of work to find out the bit you're watching in the narrative takes place, but none of that took away from the atmosphere the film creates and the fantastic acting by the cast, particularly Mark Rylance and Fionn Whitehead. They were absolutely fantastic, and I gave this 9 out of 10. It's a good film. Go watch it if you like, especially if you like war films, but even if you don't, try it out. If you like Christopher Nolan films, or you like war films, or you just like a good, solid drama, this is good. And finally, my final film of the year was Spider-Man No Way Home. I said this. Finally got to the cinema to see it. No spoilers in case you haven't, but that was good. Exciting, fan-pleasing fun with a couple of hard-hitting emotional beats. There was one character whose motivations didn't quite add up, and as it seems common these days, sometimes the action was flying around so fast it was hard to keep up with, but hard to keep up with what was going on or who you were watching. But other than those things, I couldn't have asked for more. It was a fantastic movie, loved it. I wouldn't say it's the best MCU movie like some people are saying. I think they're maybe slightly wrapped up in the thrill of the stuff that happened in particular, but it was good, and I'm glad we got what we got out of it. I can't really say more without spoiling it. I gave it 9 out of 10. And that is all the movies I watched in 2021. Will I watch more this year? Who knows? Depends how much time I've got. But that's what I watched this year. What did you watch this year? Let me know. You can give me a whole list if you want. Maybe not if it's like 200 films long. But, you know, if you watched a similar amount, you can put your whole list. Or put your top 10. What were the top 10 films you watched in 2021? Even if they were films that came out 20 years before. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with more geeky pop culture videos. See you then.